Hey guys, it's Kevin from The Forge here. I want to catch you up on what happened at The Forge last night. We continued our series in Joshua, the making of a man, and we were in Joshua chapter 9. And let me open up with a question for you to consider and think about. Has there been a time in your life where you've made some decisions, made some choices, chosen a direction, and then it didn't really go the way you wanted it to go? Maybe you ended up someplace you didn't want to end up. Maybe the results were not the results you wanted. Maybe it ended up being painful or costly, or it hurt your life in some way, or it was just different than what you anticipated, different than what you wanted. You didn't end up where you wanted to go. Well, I think we've all been there. We've probably all been there many times. Sometimes our choices lead us astray. And we are looking in Joshua chapter 9 at one such occasion where the choices of Israel led them astray. Now let me tell you the end of the story. The end of the story is that the Israelites make this covenant, this agreement, a treaty, better said, with these people of the land, of the promised land. Some of the inhabitants there of the land, they were called the Gibeonites, and they make a treaty with them, not to destroy them, not to harm them, but to live at peace with them. And this, of course, is a problem because their whole purpose at this point in history is to completely conquer the promised land and to drive out or eliminate all the inhabitants thereof. And the reason, of course, is that God is building a holy, set-apart nation for himself, and he does not want those who were the former inhabitants of the land to be hanging around in order to tempt the people of Israel into false thinking, false worship, going in rebellion against the Lord. And so the command is clear that they are not to be making agreements and treaties with the people of the land. But that's exactly what they do with the Gibeonites. So the question is, how did they end up where they didn't want to go? How do we do it? Well, let's see what happened in Joshua chapter 9. Joshua 9 verse 1 says, "Now when the kings of the west and the Jordan heard all about these things, those in the hill country and the western foothills and all along the entire coast of the great sea, the Mediterranean, as far as Lebanon, the kings of the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites, they came together to make war against Joshua and Israel." So everybody's hearing about the prowess of this fighting people and the prowess of their God, and they're gearing up for war. They're gearing up for battle. But now comes the Gibeonites, and they take a different approach, a different tact. Verse 3, "However, when the people of Gibeon heard that what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they resorted to a ruse." So they're not going to tackle it head on and try to fight these guys and fight this God. They're going to try to come up with some sort of covert operation and fool the Israelites into peace. And so this is what they do. They went as a delegation whose donkeys were loaded with worn out sacks and old wineskins, cracked and mended. And the men put on worn and patched sandals on their feet and wore old clothes. All the bread of their food supply was dry and moldy. And they went to Joshua in the camp of Gilgal and said to him, the men of Israel, "We have come from a distant country. Make a treaty with us." And so here they come, they show up, and it's this elaborate scheme where they've changed their clothing and their dress, and they've brought old worn out food and sacks so that it looks like they've been on this long, arduous journey, and now they've finally arrived and they want to establish good relations with the people of Israel. And it's all done in order to deceive. Then the men of Israel said to the Hivites, "But perhaps you live near us. How then can we make a treaty with you?" So they ask a good question right off. Like they're suspicious initially because they know that they're not supposed to make treaties with people in the land. They don't want to do that. And so they ask a good question. They're suspicious. They want to do the right thing, but they're good at deceiving. "We are your servants," they said to Joshua. But Joshua asked, "Who are you, and where do you come from?" And they answered, "Your servants have come from a very distant country because of the fame of the Lord your God." So they're building him up a little bit too. "For we have heard reports of him and all that he did in Egypt and all that he did to the 2 kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, Sihon, king of Heshbon, and Og, king of Bashan, who reigned in Ashtaroth. And our elders and all those living in our country said to us, 'Take provisions for your journey. Go and meet them and say to them, we are your servants. Make a treaty with us. This bread of ours was warm when we packed it at home.'" It was warm when we packed it at home the day we left to come to you. But now see how dry and moldy it is? And these wineskins that we filled were new, but see how cracked they are. And our clothes and sandals are worn out by the very long journey. I mean, we've been on a long road trip. Look at all our gear. It's worn out. And so they present this evidence of the length of travel that they must have endured and been through in order to get there. They must be from a far off land. And again, the Israelites seem to be doing the right thing. Like they're checking out the story. They're looking at the evidence. That's how we make decisions a lot of times. We just survey the scene, make the best decision that we can. Again, they started with a little suspicion over whether these people were local or not. And so they seem to be doing at least some of the right things, the things that we generally do in order to make decisions, make choices. They're looking it over, but again, it's a ruse and they're getting fooled. And because they don't do the main thing, they get fooled. Look at verse 14. It's the key verse. "Then the men of Israel sampled their provisions, but did not inquire of the Lord. And then Joshua made a treaty of peace with them to let them live, and the leaders of the assembly ratified it by oath." And so there it is. They did all the humanly wise things. They questioned the story. They looked at the evidence. They tried to make a good decision, but they didn't do the main thing that leads us to the best of decisions. The decisions, the thing that won't fail us when our own wisdom and our own critical thinking does fail us. The Lord and His direction, the Lord and His leading. They should have been inquiring of the Lord. That should have been their first move. Now, I don't want to take time to look at it right now, but if you're into this, go back and look at Numbers chapter 27, verses 18 through 23. Numbers 27, verses 18 through 23. And there you will see where Joshua was initially transitioning into leadership at the end of Moses' life. And he's commissioned into leadership. And it's interesting because in that passage, Joshua is given really one directive as far as his leadership. And it is to be inquiring of the Lord when he makes decisions. He's to go to the priest and inquire of the Lord through him, in order to make good, wise, God-honoring, God-directed decisions. Guys, that's what leaders do. That's what men need to do. We need to be men who are not just reliant upon ourselves and our own wisdom and our own ability to sort it out. We need to be inquiring of the Lord. That needs to be our first priority. That's always the first priority. Inquire of the Lord. Seek God when you have decisions to make, when you have options to sort out, when you have choices to make. Make sure that your first priority is to seek the Lord. Matthew 6:33 gives us that directive in the New Testament, right? Matthew 6:33, but seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. First, not last. Because that's our temptation. You know, like we're gonna do the best we can, make the best decision that we can, and if life doesn't work out, if life goes bad, if this decision turns south, if we end up in a hard spot, then we're gonna call on the Lord. No, we don't wait till then. We've all done that. And many of us just live our lives like that. We act in our own wisdom until things don't work out. Then we start to seek the Lord. We seek Him last, but we need to seek Him first. We need to inquire of Him first. Make that your priority. Imagine a life lived when you inquire of the Lord first all the days of your life. I guarantee you that is going to be a better, stronger, more joyful, productive life. That's the way we need to live it. We need to seek Him first, always.